Welcome to episode number 4 of Conversations for the End. Today's guest is Kofi King. Kofi is an ex-British powerlifting champion and a bare-knuckle boxer. He was born in Ghana and he's lived in the UK for over 20 years, raised into a Christian family, and his father is a reverend minister. Kofi states that he takes great influence on the way he lives his life from the author Ayn Rand, and he very much sees himself as a libertarian. I had a great conversation with Kofi. It's always nice to catch up with him. He's had some really interesting experiences, and I won't spoil it. I urge you just to listen through to the podcast. We talk about the warrior archetype and how that kind of manifests in Kofi's life through his life experiences, the sort of trials and tribulations that he's had, and obviously, as a bare-knuckle boxer. But yeah, it's a great conversation. He's an absolute gentleman. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, I give you Kofi King. Kofi King, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here.
Yes.
So, we ask big questions on this show, I like to think. And the question I have is, what does it feel like to get punched in the face with a bare knuckle?
At the time you get punched, in that moment, you don't think that much about it. You feel it, but you think, right, I've got to get my back, and mine's got to be harder. And you don't want them to feel yours because you want them to be out. The ideal thing is not to feel a punch for the person throwing the punch. If you feel it, it means you're conscious and you can feel the pain, but you want it so bad the person doesn't feel the pain because you're asleep. But they don't feel too bad. You get used to it. It won't kill you, let's put it that way.
Okay, so, all right, so you get used to it. I mean, ideally, I suppose in an ideal world, you don't want to be taking too many punches, right?
In an ideal world, no. In an ideal world, you don't want to take too many because you cut very easily. You start to bleed, and the referee then looks at stopping the fight, and you want to maintain your good looks as well, right?
Naturally.
So you don't want to take too many punches.
So what I'm interested in, obviously, what I've so smoothly set up there is the fact that you do engage in competitive bare-knuckle boxing.
Indeed, yes, indeed.
How did you find your way to that path?
Yeah, so I've been an athlete my whole life, a competitive athlete. I've done taekwondo, I've done weightlifting, Olympic lifting, I've done powerlifting. And I had a serious injury, back injury, from powerlifting many years ago. So I had to retire. I tried to come back so many times, but my body just wouldn't allow me because powerlifting is to do with lifting very heavy weights, doing a big deadlift, doing a big squat, and doing a big bench. My body just wouldn't allow it. So I thought, what can I do to keep myself competitive and keep myself sort of pushing and aiming for something? So I decided, you know what? I've been a martial artist many years. Let me do boxing. So I wanted to do glove boxing initially. But then I was struggling to find a fight because glove boxing is just, finding a fight is very difficult if you're good. If you're not good and you want to happily take a dive, then it's easy to find a fight. I couldn't find one. So a bare-knuckle fight was advertised in Worcester. And I thought, you know what, shall I say yes? Shall I say no? At the time I wasn't fit, but I thought, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to agree to the fight. And if I do, that would be my motivation to train as hard as I can to be fit for the fight, because if I don't, I'm going to get knocked out in front of everyone. So I agreed to the fight. I went and knocked the guy out in the second round, and that's where it started.
So that first fight, now doing my research, knowing a little bit about how it went, I guess from there for you, it went quite well.
It went pretty well. Yeah.
How did you feel? Just firstly, just clarify what was your record currently to this stage?
My
Just for
record
context.
to this day, in terms of bare knuckle, I've had five. No, I've had six. I've won five, lost one. All
Okay.
the five I've won has been by way of knockout, and the one that I've lost has been by way of knockouts as well.
Okay.
That
So
was my most recent fight in Poland.
how was there a difference in your mental state? How you were thinking about the fight, the feelings surrounding the fight from fight one, that first one you described, to the last one?
Um, I would say maybe I didn't have enough anticipation. I didn't fear the threat as much. Maybe I got comfortable. I think if you get comfortable in the fight game, you won't be your best. It just won't bring out the best out of you, and you're more likely to lose. But if you go into a fight with a healthy amount of trepidation, you're more likely to do well. So I think that could be one thing. And yeah, no, I think there is. So I need to know if there is, so I can address them. But I think there is. The mindset was different. Definitely, the mindset I think was different. And the one before that, the one I lost as well. But that wasn't bare knuckle. So I don't know. Perhaps that played a role. But I'm looking to get back in the ring soon. Within the next 3 or 4 months, I'm looking to pick up exactly where I left off. Yeah.
So we're going for more numbers, and keep
100%.
those good looks.
100%. I'm 35 now. I think I've still got some time left, so I'm just going to get in the gym, train hard as I ever have, or even more than I ever have. Train smart, and I'm looking to have another run, have another campaign, and I think this will be my best because I have a lot more data to learn from about myself, about the fight game, about various things. So I think this next run will be pretty spectacular.
So it's interesting there you said data. I'm just curious, briefly, how much, if you think, say, just I'm simplifying things here, but if we think about how we kind of have this like analytical mind and this more intuitive kind of feeling mind, when you go into a fight in this sort of preparation stage before you face someone, how much of it is thinking and data and analysis? How much of it is feeling and intuition and like a sort of inner sense of yourself and the situation?
I think it's more the latter. So a lot of it is to do with how you feel, how you see the situation. But I think also the first part is very important because if that part you don't get it right, you don't do the analytics. And one of the things I've picked up is the more sparring you do before a fight, the better you're going to be. That's a fact. The more running you do, the fitter you are, the better you're going to be. But main thing is the sparring. Get a lot of quality, consistent sparring week in, week out, week in, week out, week in, week out. Travel through the South looking for people to spar with, and you're going to do well when you're in the ring. So that's one of the things I've learned, and that's what I'm going to do a lot for my next fight. And also visualization. Just sit down and visualize everything so that when it happens, it's not the first time it's happened. Visualize getting up from the canvas. Visualize bleeding from your nose. Visualize bleeding from your eyelids, where it's blocking your vision. So when it happens, it's like, right, we've been here before. It's nothing. This is nothing. And you just keep going. So how you think and your mindset, I would say, plays the biggest role in how you perform on the night. Because it's a very short period. And it can very often come down to who wants it the most. Who's got the mental fortitude often wins. And who's got the most power.
Yeah, I suppose the What's that quote? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
They get punched
Tyson
in the
quote.
face. Yeah, that's
Mm.
true. It doesn't matter how tough you are. When a good shot lands on your chin, but if you're mentally tough, you will get up. Because in my last fight, I was hit with a beautiful left hook. I watch it back sometimes and I admire the left hook. It put me straight down, but I was straight up. And within 10 seconds, I put him down. It's like, right, we're in a fight. And if you've got that fight mentality, it's hard to beat it out of someone. If you can beat that fight out of someone, then the fight's over. It's just a matter of time till they give up.
So a lot of the stuff you're touching on there, obviously on this podcast, we talk a lot about this idea of archetypes, which is the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung's kind of idea for these sort of inherited psychological, I guess, sort of patterns in human culture that he believes are sort of in the psyche, and that we can see them. So it sounds to me it's this archetype of the warrior. A lot of the stuff you're describing there, people will, when they imagine that, when they hear you talking about that, I'm sure they can draw a number of images from films and media. You think Rocky Balboa going those final rounds of Apollo Creed in the first
Yeah,
Rocky. You've
yeah,
got Maximus in Gladiator. You've got, I don't know, Troy. You've got all
yeah.
these different sort of images. These, what we would say, are archetypal images. So they're kind of representations of these psychological patterns that we all kind of inherently, intuitively know. It sounds very much like that's an archetype that, although you don't sort of have this Jungian background, you intuitively obviously know, and you embody at times, and kind of runs through you. So I wanted to talk about this book. Okay, so this is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. For the
Okay.
listeners,
Yeah.
I recommend it. It's a very good book if you're starting to get into Jung. For those listening, it kind of plays on some of those Jungian ideas in relation to masculinity and kind of being this, how to be a sort of maturated man, basically a whole integrated man. And it talks about the positive and the negative polarizations of the archetype. Now, I watched an interview. It was kind of like a mini podcast that you did before one of your fights today, just as a little bit of added research. And
Yeah.
I admire it, Kofi, because the first thing you said, you were very confident in that you were going to win the fight, and you did go on to win the fight. You went on to knock this man out, very quite swiftly. But you alluded to doing that, but you did not stay there long. It was blink and you miss it in terms of
Yeah.
both the knockout, but also in the way that you presented your confidence. Okay, you did not
Yeah.
dwell on it. You did not hammer the point. You made a passing comment that you were going to win, and then you proceeded to spend 4 to 5 minutes of what was like a 12-minute interview with both fighters, complimenting the man you were about to fight.
Yeah.
And it made me think of this quote in this book. So it says, unlike the hero's actions, the warrior's actions are never overdone, never dramatic for the sake of drama. The warrior never acts to reassure himself that he is as potent as he hopes he is. And it seems that came through. I'd read it that day, sort of brushing up on this stuff, and then I watched that interview. How important is that balance to you between confidence and, clarity and confidence, and not straying over into arrogance?
Yeah. It's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. It's a fine line. Now, a lot of greats are often seen as arrogant. So if we look at, the great Muhammad Ali, he was seen as arrogant. If we look at for example, Conor McGregor, he's seen as arrogant because, but at the time, they're at the top of their game. Now, sometimes when someone is being arrogant, I remember an unbeaten boxer said to someone in a press conference, all that loud talking you're doing, who are you trying to convince? Are you trying to convince yourself? Are you trying to convince other people? And sometimes there is an element of that, where if you're doing too much, look, the strongest guy in the room doesn't need to shout about it. He just really doesn't need to shout about it. The fastest, there's no need for it. If there is, then do it. But if there isn't, why do it? The gentleman you're talking about, his name is Jimmy McCrory. I'm a fan of the guy. I was a fan of the guy. I really was. And I just needed to take that opportunity to tell him that, dude, I'm a fan of you. You know, I admire you. He was one of the pioneers of the bare-knuckle game. And to me, that conversation with him was more important than we're going to fight. That's already a done deal. We're going to fight that weekend. So I felt no need to keep harping about what I was going to do to him in the ring, because that wasn't the place for it. I just wanted to conversate with the guy. We would fight and the fight would be over, and I admire him. I would still admire him after the fight. And I just wanted to let him know that I do admire you and I'm a big fan of you. Confidence isn't always... You can fake confidence. You can fake being a hero, which a lot of people do. I've seen it certainly the last 8 months. And when you have to try that hard to be something, maybe you're not it. Just maybe.
And I suppose, kind of linking it back to, you were talking about, I guess, preparation to a fight is almost balancing the tension between this intuitive element of yourself and this sort of analytical part of yourself. And I imagine then applying that through dedication, through the training that you talked about, all the different types of training you've done in the past, and how in that first fight you wanted to just really apply yourself because of the pressure that was on there to not get knocked out and not look foolish, and not get hurt, obviously.
That's true as well.
But you've sort of you're balancing that tension of the intuitive elements of yourself, the analytical parts of yourself, in with that actual doing of the training that's taking you to the point of, let's say, as an example, this interview, where you inwardly, like you say, it's authentic because you believe, you're not faking it, you believe that this will be the outcome. You're doing your visualization, it's all culminating in this sort of up to this moment to the point where I suppose, which is that point where you do bop this fella on the nose and he falls over multiple times. Because just explain briefly before I just want to cover, we'll move to something else to do with this archetype, but just explain so people are aware with bare knuckle boxing just how the rules work, because it's slightly different, isn't it, to your standard?
It's slightly different, and each organization is slightly different. So I think this guy we're talking about, Jimmy McCrory, he's a big name. He was one of the pioneers of bare knuckle boxing in the UK. And at one point, he held the transatlantic champion. So and I think it was Irish national boxing champions in the amateur. So he's a very, very experienced boxer. And there was a fight in Blackpool. I think it was the first fight after COVID or the second fight after COVID. So I hadn't fought for a while. And when the bell goes, within 10 seconds, I put him down. He gets back up. I put him down again, all in the first round. He gets back up. I put him down again. And after the third time, he makes a count. He's a tough guy. He gets up each time before the 10 seconds. But his cornerman, who's known him for years, sees it and waves in a towel and throws it in. So your referee or your corner can't stop the fight. So his corner made the wise decision to stop the fight. And it was a very wise decision because the fight was only going one way. And to be honest with you, even I wouldn't want it to go where the fight was going.
Credit to him, when that towel got thrown in, he looked gutted. For a man that had just been punched in the face by you, bare knuckle, 3 or 4 times, he looked gutted that he could not say and carry that on. So again,
well, I'm not sure if that's why he was gutted. He was gutted, but I'm not sure he was gutted because of that. I was gutted by how he was dispatched. I think it was more he was gutted by how quickly, he was still in shock by how quickly he was dispatched. But look, all credit to the guy. We had a good conversation afterwards. We had a good conversation afterwards. No credit to him. It takes a tough man to want to get in the ring with me. At that time, I was struggling to find an opponent. So the fact that he wanted to do it, and he was much lighter than me, I was very grateful. I was very grateful to him.
We've, I sort of talked there about how I imagine the kind of discipline it takes to sort of train for something like that. And again, I might keep doing this, but I'm going to refer to this book and where he talks about the warrior, because I think it's interesting to have this stuff in theory. We can talk about this stuff, read it in books, and we can kind of, watch videos on it. But I do think some of the best stuff related to archetypes and sort of psychological ideas is seeing it lived, and hearing it from someone who lives it. And bare-knuckle boxing, it's to a lot of people that would be the sort of one of the ultimate warrior acts that you could maybe do. It's pretty sort of primal. It feels quite archaic in its approach. So I'll go to this quote, and then I'm going to ask you a question on this. So again, this is from the book. So it talks about discipline, and it says discipline means that he, being the warrior, has the rigor to develop control and mastery over his mind and over his body, and that he has the capacity to withstand pain, both psychological and physical. He is willing to suffer to achieve what he wants to achieve. So just tell me then, discipline, how do you relate to it? Do you have any sort of tips, any advice for people that maybe are looking to get more disciplined through how you relate to it in your life?
Yeah, I would say discipline is a key ingredient of success, because anyone can have a dream. Anyone can have a dream. And I think the difference between whether your dream is realized or if it's not realized is discipline. That's the key ingredient. That's what everybody can't have. And what is discipline? Are you born with it? Do you practice it? I don't know. I don't know where we get it from. That discipline is everything. So within the next few months, if I want to get back in the ring, it's going to be about discipline. And my discipline will determine how my next fight goes. Right? So the importance of discipline, the importance of discipline is, if you found something you want to do, something you want to achieve, without discipline, that thing is simply not going to happen. And discipline is built up over time. You just got to take a step at a time. Just don't look at the whole picture. Look at what's in front of you, and it's a lot of simple decisions, a lot of short decisions. So what do I eat today? Eating the right thing rather than eating what you feel like is discipline. Do I go for a run today? Doing the right thing, or what you should be doing rather than what you feel like, that's an act of discipline. Do I want to read a book? Do I want to meditate? And then eventually discipline become natural habits. But there is a period where you have to really put the effort in, because you've made that decision beforehand that this is what you're going to do. And that's one of the benefits of writing things down, or journaling things, or setting yourself targets or SMART goals, is that once you set them with a goal in mind, you are more likely to become disciplined. Our future happiness really depends on what we're doing today. Even in 10, 20 years' time, it depends on what we're doing today. And that's why discipline, developing that to do the right thing, or to do the right thing over and over and over again, I can't really overstate the importance of it. I really can't. And I think sometimes in some of these superhero movies, sometimes they miss those parts. Some of them don't. Like with Apollo Creed, it shows the struggle that he went through, running up those steps in those buildings. It shows that A lot of it goes into it. Sometimes a lot of people only see the finished part, the hero. But a lot does go into it. And you've got to almost fall in love with it, a lot that goes into it, if you know what I mean. You've got to fall in love with the process. You've got to fall in love with the training. You've got to fall in love with the reading. You've got to fall in love with the watching what you should be watching. And because if you want to live just instinctively like a primate, that just does whatever he feels like doing. Whatever you feel like scrolling, you scroll. Whatever Instagram gives you, you scroll. Whatever Twitter gives you, you scroll, rather than searching for content and just honing your mind, honing your body. You definitely won't be your best self. If you want to be your best self, you've got to live intentionally. You've got to do everything intentionally.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you say, they don't spend a lot of time on that kind of the discipline of those sort of movie characters. And it's true. You think in a lot of these movies, often that kind of part of the story, whether the warrior character or the hero character is kind of improving at their craft, getting better, is often encapsulated in a montage where like a long period of time passes. Maybe there's some sort of music over the top, and it's all kind of passed through very quickly, whereas in reality, in the sort of lived experience of trying to embody this warrior or the hero, in whatever way that may be in your life, those moments of kind of smashing the sword with the hammer to sharpen it, it's a tough process, and it's
and that takes a long time. That's the bulk of it as well, but it doesn't make good theatre, I guess.
No. You'd have a long part of the movie just on the very boring process of it. But in my own experience of kind of cultivating more discipline, I like the way you were talking about it, because I just, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get this sense that maybe you don't see it as this kind of perfectly linear process, which I often think in modern culture, maybe in kind of modern masculinity, social media, influencer areas, this idea of discipline is kind of spoken about as you're disciplined or you're kind of like incapable, you're a loser, blah. Whereas in actual fact, my experience with discipline was kind of this want to be disciplined, this urge to build healthy habits and to, like you say, eat right, go and train, kind of meditate, think more clearly, be less kind of reactive with emotions over the course of my life. But what I found was, in reality, that intent was there, but it didn't always work linearly. It would be that sometimes it would work for a while and then you'd fall off, but then you'd come back to it and then it would work for a bit longer. And like you say, eventually it turns into this, into just natural. I remember when I first started sort of going to the gym and it being like, oh, I really have to pull myself up to go. And now if I don't go, I'm not sort of, I'm not having a good time.
Yeah, no, I see it. No, I get what exactly. When I do agree with you, Large, I do agree with you very much. You won't always get it right when you push onto a path. You definitely won't always get it right. And when you get it wrong, how you deal with that is also important. So you don't want to beat yourself up too much. Just realize you've got it wrong. But that, so long as that intention or that desire is still there, fine, dust yourself up and go again. The fact that you've got a few days wrong, or you've been somewhere you don't want to go, you've done something, that's fine. It's done. It's done. It's in the past. Just get back on the right track. You're right. It's not always linear. You will have your dips. You will have your dips. And then if you do that long enough, as you said, it becomes a habit. And now if you don't go to the gym, something's wrong right before you had to push yourself to go. So, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Chris.
Okay, good. I'm glad that I'm onto something. So I have learned something over these years. I am developing.
Good.
Yes, it's finally paying off.
That's good.
35 years on the planet. I'm getting there. All right. So I want to move on through this
Yeah.
warrior archetype some more because it's really interesting to hear your kind of lived insight into your own experience with
Yeah.
how you resonate with these ideas. And what I do think is interesting is we talk about these archetypal energies that we kind of run through cultures, regardless of whether those cultures have like ever met. This is how Jung, the psychologist, sort of came to develop this idea. He realized that cultures around the world had similar representations of certain ideas, like the
Mhm.
warrior, like the hero, but those they'd never met. They'd never sort of. It was not a result of transmigration. It was almost as if it was coming from within the human race.
Mhm.
And it's a testament when you you read something from a book and then you hear someone's lived experience of sort of how they resonate with that, and you
Mhm.
see it. You see it emerging. So yeah, it's great insights. So this is another line I want to read. So it says here, the warrior energy also shows what we can call transpersonal commitment. His loyalty is to something, a cause, a god, a people, a task, a nation, larger than individuals. Tell me about how you relate, if you relate, I'm not trying to force anything on you, to this idea of a transpersonal orientation. How
No, no. Yes, that's a good question. I definitely do relate with the trans. What's the word again?
transpersonal?
Transpersonal. Yes, I definitely do relate to it because I think you're at your best when you believe you're doing something for something more than you. Whether you're doing it for your family, your last name, whether you're doing it for your nation, whether you're doing it for an idea, for a cause, right? Or whether you're doing it for a god, your god, or you're doing it for your nation, whatever it is you're doing it for. I think it brings, because you can let yourself down. If I let myself down, it's not the end of the world. It's just me. I don't really care that much. I do, but not that much. But for something more than me, I think it always brings out something a little extra special. It brings out this fire. It definitely brings out this fire, because what I want to do and what I want to achieve is certainly more than me. It's not for me to wear a nice jacket or for me to wear nicer trousers or a nicer hat or whatever. That stuff doesn't excite me that much, or for me to defend just myself. That stuff just won't summon the best of me. Whereas I think for me, ideas, as you know, Chris, are very important to me. Ideas are very, very important to me, and seeing the advancement of humanity as a whole is very advancing. I may have disagreements with other people as to how humanity advances, but I think that's very important. I think anyone who resonates with any of these superhero characters would do it for more than just themselves. Because doing it for just yourself, it's it's almost empty. It's almost empty, and I just think you would lack the personality type or what it takes to reach that level if you're doing it just for yourself. Whereas if you're doing it for something more than yourself, it would. I don't know if you believe in providence, but the universe will just give you something, and you will do something greater. You will do something greater. I think I mentioned the in the book regarding the samurai that shaved his head. That said, that's the bit that stuck out to me the most, because that samurai wasn't acting just in his self-interest, wasn't acting just for him.
So just
But
before you carry on, for context, so
yeah,
this is from, I sent you a video prior to the podcast from Like Stories of Old, who I recommend everyone go and check out on YouTube, to do with the warrior archetype, and it was from the film, I think, Seven Samurai, where at the end the samurai shaves his head. So yeah, continue.
mhm.
Sorry, I just want to give
Yeah.
listeners
So
context.
basically, a samurai shaved his head to become a monk, to disguise himself as a monk, so that he would survive to fight another day, something like that, if I'm not wrong,
I hope
right?
so.
And shaving your head as a samurai was a sign of defeat and humiliation. That's one of the worst things you could do. But he did it looking at the bigger picture. He did it looking at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture wasn't just himself. There was a bigger picture than himself, and that's why he did it. And for me, that was, I would say, that's one of my biggest take homes from that book, or from that video that you sent. Him doing that, and that's something I'm going to ponder on for a bit longer, even after we speak, because that was powerful.
Planting seeds. I'm planting seeds, Kofi.
You are
That's
indeed,
probably...
yeah. You
So
are indeed.
so you've
Thinking of
talked
the
you've talked about the importance there of like orientating yourself to something higher. Just can you tell us a little bit more what that kind of is for you? What that higher orientation is for you? Now, it might not be one thing; it could be many things. But what's something that sort of comes to
yeah.
your
So
mind?
for that higher orientation, for me, as you know, I'm a traditional, I'm a Christian, or a traditionalist Christian. So for me, my faith and the advancement of humanity. I want humanity to do well. I think there are forces for good and there are forces for evil, or forces that are certainly not for good. And I think getting myself to a place where I can be a force for good, a force to help other people. As I mentioned before, I've been, certainly to you, I've been in HMP for Winchester for 8 months on remand, still with no convictions, no criminal record. So it's quite an experience. But while I was there, I saw people who were really suffering, and the only way they could escape is by taking drugs. And that did break my heart. When I saw the position people were in, it genuinely broke my heart. It made me very, very sad, because I wasn't suffering like they were. I would meditate, I would read my books. Some of these people couldn't even read or write, and they're English. They're not refugees. They're English. They were born here on the council estate, right? And but they can't read or write. And I think, how can a fully grown adult engage in the modern world not being able to read or write? But there's a lot of people. There's a lot of them, and there was a part of me that wanted to help these people, and I did while I was there. Certainly for those who wanted to help themselves, I did while I was there. But whether life is good or life is bad is down to us. We can all play a role. We can all do something, and I'm trying to do what I can do within my sphere of influence.
Yeah, and that sounds like good advice, I think, for people. One thing that it makes me think of, that I think I came to realize over the years, is this idea of, or to preface it. So you see a lot of people in life struggling, unhappy, suffering from what they might call depression. It might be more like a kind of melancholy. It may not be sort of what we say would be clinical depression, but it's this sort of long-standing kind of sort of low mood, not feeling sort of their place in the world. And I think often, maybe part of because of the culture we have and we've cultivated over the years, which has its positives, there's this want to be sort of saved from it, and to be taken away, or to remove oneself away from the kind of unpleasantness of reality. And I think what I came to realize over the years is like the unpleasantness of reality is the trade-off for living. And it's
That is one way to put it. That is a good way to put it, actually. It is.
and it's there, and I think what can come from, what can give people some ease in that is this kind of voluntary acceptance of that suffering that exists. There is this, you might be familiar, and we'll come to this very shortly. But I think in Buddhism, they have this, one of the phrases that they say is, there is suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. So suffering exists. It is inevitable. What we can do is we can accept it. And I think of it, I like that idea. I think of it in terms of, I think about the symbolism in Christianity and of Christ. And I always say to my friends now, is if they're talking about, oh, I really don't want to go to the gym today, my friends that are just getting into working out, I don't know if it's sort of sacrilegious or blasphemy, but I'll say, bear your cross, man. Like, bear your cross. But it's advice that is in that symbolism of the story of Christ, that we can all pick up our cross, so to speak. You don't have to be Christian to resonate with the idea that voluntary acceptance of inevitable suffering could be good because it's inevitable. So if you can sort of volunteer to face it forthrightly, then you can maybe, like you said, in the same way you build a habit, or the same way you can handle sort of blood in your eyes or a bloody nose from getting punched in a bare-knuckle boxing fight, you can become acclimatized to the suffering of reality that is there. So tell me more then. So you're in that environment, and that's obviously a really tough environment. There's people there that you've talked about, sort of disenfranchised, people that are less privileged in many ways and lack some of the very basic kind of privileges that many of us take for granted.
Yeah.
And you say you're trying to help those people, but I imagine it's still a tough experience for you to go through. It was very... How did you manage that? You before the show, you touched on this idea that you went to these, you dabbled your toe in the waters of Buddhism. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as well.
So the whole experience was a great experience. It really was. I made the most of it. Let's put it that way. So unexpectedly, I found myself at HMP Winchester. And when you go on the induction wing, which is A wing, which is everyone there is fairly new. But a lot of them, that's not their first time in prison. People seem to choose prison as a career choice. They're in and out all the time. And I was pretty pissed to be in there, if I'm frank. I was pissed. But then I managed. So we're locked up 23 hours, 15 minutes a day. You're locked up in a cell. The cast iron door. So it's, and I'm sort of a guy like my walks. So in there, it's almost like a retreat that people have to pay for, like a meditation or Buddhist retreat that people have to pay for. I got it for free. I was forced to be by myself for most of the day. All you can do is read books. And you know what? At some point, I was meditating 5 times a day for long periods.
You just floated out of there. Just levitated out the doors.
Yeah, literally. So, it got me to enjoy my time with myself and like dealing with suffering. Suffering exists. That's a fact of life. We'll all get old. We'll all get sick. Suffering exists. So one has to deal with suffering without, deal with the events of life without attachment or aversion. And it definitely tested me as a person, being in there. Definitely tested me as a person. Because it got easier and easier and easier as it went on. And at some point, I wanted to volunteer to go into the segregation unit, which is where if you're really bad in prison, it's like a prison within the prison. They take you there. I wanted to go
Prison Plus.
Yeah, Prison Plus. Yeah, Prison Plus. it's an underground prison where people just like smear feces and urine. It's not nice. I wanted to go there just to push myself, just to test myself. But they said, nah, you have to do something pretty bad to get there. And I wasn't willing to do. I want to hurt someone to get there, so I didn't end up there. But the whole experience was good. I was introduced to new people that I wouldn't have otherwise met. I wouldn't otherwise hang around the road, man. Or I don't know if it's a derogatory term, but a junkie or a crackhead or a shoplifter or asylum seek, like a refugee coming off a boat.
Someone we shall say someone who is drug dependent, perhaps.
Someone who's drug dependent. Okay, that's the word. Look. I'll be honest with you. I used to use the word crackhead like flippantly until once when I first got there. They said, "What did you look like?" Someone robbed someone's house. I said, "Mate, you look like a crackhead," and everyone was like, "I was like, oh shit, yeah." And then I just changed the way I speak because a lot of people there did take crack, so I changed the way I speak. So look, I miss them. The people that I stayed there with, I do miss them. I got to know a lot of them. And their life stories. Like whenever you speak to someone who's drug dependent, before you judge them, and the Christian chaplain told me this: before you judge them, just spend some time with them. Just try and get to know them. And that's what I did. Just try and get to know them. And you have a very different take on them because some people have been dealt a very hard blow in life, Chris. Like from the beginning. I was there being harsh and like, nah, personal responsibility this, personal responsibility that. And then when you hear their life stories, you're like, damn. I don't know how good my personal responsibility would be if I'd lived the life you lived from that young an age. So I definitely developed sympathy for a lot of them.
I think that's, again, you're kind of highlighting this kind of mindful warrior mindset because you're acknowledging there that you have a sort of structure of thinking, maybe a way of seeing the world, and then when confronted with something that challenges that, you're willing to let that part go. You're not holding too tightly to this structure of thinking of how you see the world, to acknowledge, this bad hand that someone's been dealt, and to, I guess, in those moments, you're obviously, we're all capable of doing this, but it's hard to do for all of us, I think, is to acknowledge, when we might be in elements of got it wrong, maybe to some degree, that maybe it isn't always what we initially thought. And I don't doubt that you were like I don't think you were blind to that being the case sort of beforehand, but I think in those moments, the way you talk about it is you're willing to reflect and it sort of revealed something to you about the world, and you're not sort of palming it away. You're openly bringing that up and acknowledging that, and I think that's very much part of this kind of this way of the warrior, this way you can kind of embody that. So yeah, that's interesting to see. And how did you find the Buddhism? Did you
Oh no, it's amazing. It was amazing. It really was amazing. So the Buddhist chaplain, her name was Pema, and I was going there once a week on a Wednesday, and there's a few people there. It was very oversubscribed, so I think there could be a maximum of about 10 or 12 people at the Buddhist sanghas. And I didn't know a thing about Buddhism before. I didn't know a thing about it before I started. I didn't know if they believe in a god. Do you become a fee paying card carrying member? Like, what is it about? So we went there, I asked her some questions, but I was meditating before then because I discovered meditation a while ago. So I was meditating anyway. So I did a meditation session with her, and I thought I would be going there just to meditate. But the teachings of the Buddha, initially, it was like it was very new ideas, and I was resistant. I remember one of the teachers, I was so resistant to it. And when I went back into my cell, I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? And I looked at it differently. I was like, okay, I can see, I can see what she means. We're talking about. Let me see if I can remember what we're talking about. We're talking about impermanence, and that's an objective. It's a hardcore objectivist. We believe existence exists, right? And we have an objective reality, and we're talking about impermanence in the Buddhist. But even objectivism realizes that we can't know everything. There's things that we just do not know. There's just things that we just do not know. And I think it's made my life better. It's made my life better. I've learned new ideas. And there's ideas that I'm carrying on. I'm actually looking for a place to go and meditate locally, actually, if I can find a place. If you don't expose yourself to new ideas, how do you test the ideas you already have? Is the way I look at it. How do you test the ideas you already have to see if they're good ideas or bad ideas? If you live in an echo chamber with people who only have your ideas or people who only see things from your worldview, you've got to be willing to test what you believe. And I think that's what I did. And I found the teachings of the Buddha to be of great benefit. And a lot of them were quite similar to the teachings of Christ. A lot of them were very similar. But I tell you what, there was a guy, his name was Hong Chi Sha, a Chinese guy, who during the first song at the chaplain was like, we have a Christian with us today, this. And then he said, oh, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian too. I thought, really? I shouldn't have thought that. Just because it was Chinese, you can be Chinese and a Christian at the same time. But for some reason, I thought that. And he goes, I'm going to tell you about a book written by Jesus and the Buddha. I thought, what? I thought the Buddha was 500 years before Jesus. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's true. Jesus wrote it in one of his previous lives with the Buddha. I thought, wow.
This guy's clued in. This guy's got his finger on the pulse.
Away, Chris.
He's got his finger on the pulse of the prophets. He knows.
Honestly, I was blown away. But we shouldn't be scared of new ideas. we shouldn't run away from new ideas. It's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's again, I think it's good advice. I've seen it in my own life. I think very much, we don't have to sort of dive too much into it, but I would just say, generally speaking, much of our sort of relationship, I think, over the years was this. We've sort of engaged with each other in different capacities, and we would often have these kind of sort of discussions and debates. And I can acknowledge now that in those debates, a lot of the ideas that I held and that I was so on the hill that I was dying on, I was so holding on to, that I believed to be sort of virtuous and sort of categorically, unquestionably right. There was a period in my life later down the line where I had a few kind of quite profound sort of wake-up calls, I guess you could call them, and realised that I didn't really think I believed those ideas, that I didn't necessarily, hadn't thought them all the way through. Deep down in my heart of hearts, I didn't necessarily subscribe to them. I in many cases didn't really live my life by them. And it was all a facade. And I think having to acknowledge that in yourself and then to let those pieces go, it's liberating, but it's also quite dangerous because, if everything that you've made yourself to be is a facade, and then you have to let all of that go, you might not have anything left. which is
well, you can build yourself up as who you really are, I guess.
Well, exactly, and I think that's something worth encouraging. But I speak definitely from experience of living that, and I think it's really encouraging what you're saying is that be open to listening to what someone else has to say, because there's a good chance that they have something to say that could really benefit you, even if they come across as sort of adversarial to you. I think that's good. So we've talked then, to kind of briefly summarize, I just want to bring us to what we've been through so far. So we've talked about this idea of kind of balancing this like analytical mind, this intuitive mind, kind of both in like fighting, I guess, but also I think from the way you've spoken, that kind of seems to come into your general way of being in life. You've kind of, when you've spoken about your experiences, you talk about them in somewhat of an intuitive way, and then also in a way where you're sort of rationally sort of doing that kind of cognitive sort of deduction of things and breaking it down. And we talked about discipline and how that's kind of the same process of kind of you have to fail. You have to fail to improve. And again, that makes me think of what you just said there. It's like, in some sense, admitting you were wrong about something is kind of, it feels like a failure in the moment. It feels like, oh no. But actually what it is, in the same way that building a habit in the gym or, on the boxing bag or shadow boxing, this kind of acknowledgement that this failure, this letting go of a part of yourself that hasn't sort of achieved some standard of something that you've abstractly put in your head, is part of a process that actually makes you a more whole, more kind of, in Jungian terms, we might use the term individuated, but let's say just sort of developed human being.
Yeah.
That it all sounds great. And we've talked about suffering and facing suffering and resilience. I'm kind of interested, Kofi. That sounds, like I said, a tough experience. I'm interested in the transformative nature of suffering, to the point where maybe, because again, I think people may be listening, they might be thinking, yeah, I know I can face these things with resilience. I know I can accept that suffering exists, but sometimes it's just too much. Given that we've just said there that part of it is like failing, be it in all these different avenues of life, sort of failure and acknowledging you kind of got it wrong is important. And where in your life, where in your life have you really felt that weight of suffering, where it's become almost impossible to face it, or it's been most challenging to face it with this kind of warrior mentality of acceptance and of, this is going to develop me? Because I think people hear it and it makes sense to them abstractly, but the real weight of suffering can be somewhat unbearable. You talk about the Christian story, right? And one thing I've always loved about that is that moment where Christ in the story, if you think about it as a mythology, as Jungian terms would, like Jungian thinkers might think of that story as a myth that represents something psychological and archetypal that happens, in life. And when Christ says, why have you forsaken me? I think it's Jordan Peterson that says it somewhere, but he says the suffering was so unbearable that it was too much for what Western culture deemed symbolically the archetypal perfect man. There was this vision of a perfect man, and even for that idea of a perfect man that Western culture created, the weight of existence of his suffering was too much. And I think that's what I'm getting at, really, is there will be points where it gets too much, and we have to find.
There will be. I don't doubt that there will be, but I've been thinking about the answer or the question as you've been asking it. And despite what I've been through in the past, and I've been through quite a lot in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I would say I'm still really waiting for my Garden of Gethsemane moments properly. I'm still waiting for that moment. And I'm sure it'll come. I'm sure it'll come. I don't look forward to it.
And when it does,
I'm sure it'll come. When I'll say, Lord,
when it does, I'll be the first one to tap you up to get you back on the podcast. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's happened.
please be. Please be.
Let's get him on for
Yeah,
the
I'm sure
content.
they'll come. Yeah, I'm sure they'll come. So I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for that. I think my difficulties have been progressive. So it's been like a step after a step. So it's come, and then I was hit so hard back in 2001, and that was such a knock that anything since then, I've been like, yeah, I've been there before. Yeah, I've been there before. I've been there before. Um, it'll pass. So I've got that mindset. Yeah, that this will pass. Yeah, it'll pass. Even when I'm locked, when I was locked up, I was like, yeah, it'll pass. And I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one thing about perception. I may be going off on a limb here, but while I was in prison, I met a guy during my first week who said something to me, and that made all the difference in terms of how I viewed prison. He said to me, he's been on remand for 8 months, right? He'd been on remand for 8 months, and he said, "Mate, prison's nothing. It's nothing. It's just R&R, rest and recuperation." And I thought, you know what? You're right. You're right. And since that thought dawned on me, it completely changed how I view it. How I viewed it. Completely changed how I viewed it. So sometimes we just need to completely change how we view the difficulties in our lives or the challenge that we're going through. Because some people are locked up and they're going mad. They're driving themselves mad, right? Because HMP Winchester is a remand prison. So a lot of people there haven't yet been convicted of a crime. So if you think you've been wrongly in prison, that you're just driving yourself mad, smashing the door, harming yourself, whatever you're doing, if you just change your perception slightly on it, that can make all the difference.
Yeah. I think that's again, good advice, man. And there's a quote I wanted to show you, and I think you've led us in to kind of wrap up with this quote, because I think what you've said there is kind of and what you've touched on throughout the podcast really kind of is wrapped up in this quote. So it's from a book called A Tragic Sense of Life, and it was read to Carl Jung. One of his he did like a lecture on kind of the transformative power of suffering that he thought deep suffering had, and someone stood up and read this passage from this book. So I'm going to read it now and to kind of wrap us up. But I think it touches on what you're saying there about changing perception, and we've talked about acceptance of suffering and kind of it's unavoidable, right? So the quote goes, "The cure for suffering, let me start again. So the cure for suffering, which, as we have said, is the collision of consciousness with unconsciousness, is not to be submerged in unconsciousness, but to be raised to consciousness and to suffer more. The evil of suffering is cured by more suffering, by higher suffering. Do not take opium, but put salt and vinegar in the soul's wound. For when you sleep and no longer feel the suffering, you are not. And to be, that is imperative. Do not then close your eyes to the agonizing Sphinx, but look her in the face and let her seize you in her mouth and crunch you with her 100,000 poisonous teeth and swallow you. And when she has swallowed you, you will know the sweetness of the taste of suffering."
Wow.
It's good, right?
That's some words.
It is, yeah.
That's some words.
It's
What book's that from again, Chris?
It's the book is called A Tragic Sense of Life, and the author is apologies for anyone listening who knows how to pronounce this and I butcher it, but it's Miguel de Unamuno. Okay. But it's it's a goodie when it comes to these kind of quotes, and that that line, the sweetness of the taste of suffering. It's going through what you've said, whether it be reps in the gym, be it punched in the face, be it being incarcerated against your will, for effectively as an innocent person, these things are inevitable, and in one shape or another, I think, is, maybe not those specific things for everyone, but in one shape or another. And I think some of the values that you've talked about in this episode, some of the ways you can kind of confront those things forthrightly for for other people, for something higher, and to manage that within yourself, I think is really fantastic to hear. And I really appreciate you sharing your insights and talking about that, because
my pleasure.
It's really well articulated. So thank you, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. It's been a pleasure. So if people want to, you're very welcome. So if people want to find you, where can they find you right now?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. My name is Kofi King, and on Instagram, I'm KO_Kofi King. I post on there every now and then. I should really post more, and I'm trying to post more. I'll be posting on my training, and just stuff about myself coming up to my next fight, whenever that may be. So yeah, hit me up on a follow, drop me a message. I'll message back, and let's get to know each other.
And we'll have you on again when you've won that next fight and you've knocked someone
out.
Sounds
good. Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.